Thank you for joining us. Our guest today is David Shulman, a Fort Lauderdale attorney specializing in estate planning, probate and trust administration, in addition to business planning, wealth preservation and asset protection services. He worked for the U.S. Department of Justice and the IRS and is involved in several good causes and organizations, including the Anti-Defamation League and the Jewish Federation of Broward County. He'll advise us on subjects most of us rarely think about following these messages.
My grandparents escaped the Nazis in Vienna and went to Shanghai. So did 16,000 other German and Austrian Jews. This book is my attempt to tell their story, or really to let them tell their own stories. It's a book of oral history based on a dozen interviews that I've done with former refugees who've told their whole story, from deciding to go to Shanghai, taking a boat, that's what this picture is here, getting off the boat in Shanghai, creating a new life in Shanghai, surviving the war, and then eventually coming to the United States. The book is available online from Amazon, Barnes & Noble. You can order it at your bookstores. If I may say so, I found these stories fascinating to listen to when I first heard the refugees talk. I found it fascinating to put them together in this book. I think you'll find this book interesting to read and revealing about Jewish life in Shanghai.
Welcome to Yad L'Kashish in Jerusalem, which for over 50 years has provided thousands of needy elderly with a way to remain part of society. Working in the artistic studios and receiving a range of social and financial benefits enables the seniors to remain productive and to retain their dignity and self-respect.
I think this organization gives the elderly a wonderful opportunity to participate, to be active in their lives, and to do this through the remainder of their lives as long as they can.
It's not interesting to stay at home to do nothing.
More than 300 elderly who come to work on a daily basis because this is where they find a place in society.
They come here, they get paid to do the work. It makes a difference between what their social security benefits are from the Israeli government and what they really need to live.
This beautiful silk scarf that you will wear was made by an 85-year-old woman who now has a reason to get up in the morning, get dressed, and go out of her house.
для пожилых людей это жизнь. מפני שזה המקום היחידי שאני מוצא את עצמי במקום טוב.
פה כמו משפחה, ממש כמו משפחה.
כל כך הרבה אנשים יקבלו באהבה ובשמחה.
It's not a historical place, but it's making history. That's what's important.
With us now is attorney David Shulman. A pleasure to have you.
Oh, thank you.
We are living in a strange time in history, and so many things are happening in the world, and you are so involved with community affairs. But I'd like us to begin, before we talk about your views on politics and history and so forth, I'd like us to talk a little bit about your area of expertise.
Well, I'm an attorney in Fort Lauderdale, and I practice in the area of estate planning. Estate planning is asking yourself the question, one, how can I control my property while I'm alive and able? Two, how can I take care of myself and my loved ones if I become incapacitated? And then to be able to give what I want to who I want, when I want, how I want, and pay the least amount of taxes and administrative fees as possible.
It so happens that many people don't really understand how complicated issues can get in your areas of expertise.
Well, we live in a complicated world. Today, people are often on their second or third marriages. Both husband and wife have children from previous marriages, and the assets that we own are becoming more and more complex. It's not just a house and money in the bank anymore. People own stocks, and they have retirement accounts, and they have life insurance policies, and they own their own small businesses. And then today, there's a whole new area of digital assets, and the things that are totally intangible but are only online, but also have their own value.
You know, I hadn't considered how complicated things can get with blended families and so forth. But let's change subject. Let me ask you a little bit about your background, where you came from before you ended up in Florida.
Well, actually, I grew up in Florida. I'm one of the few people who have been here since the late 70s. And growing up, I went to, I came from a strong Jewish family. I went to the David Posnack Hebrew Day School from kindergarten through 8th grade. It wasn't even called the David Posnack Hebrew Day School, but it was one of the first Jewish day schools at the time in South Florida. And then I went to a public high school, but after that I went to Brandeis University, which is a very large, it's a non-sectarian but Jewish-sponsored university. And then after that I went to law school in Washington, D.C. I stayed in Washington, D.C. I worked for the government for 7 years or so. Then I came back home to South Florida, where I got a master's in law in estate planning at Miami. I worked for a big firm for a few years, and since 2009, I found my own firm in downtown Fort Lauderdale.
How has Florida changed, the community that is, in the years you've been here?
Oh, it's incredibly. I remember we moved down here, Broward County, there were cows everywhere. There were farms and cow pastures where the Broward Mall is, and just the growth has been spectacular in the past 30 years. What I've really found in the past 10 years, it's getting younger, is that people are no longer retiring to South Florida, or no longer retiring to Broward. They're retiring to the Villages or to Asheville, North Carolina, and Broward's becoming a younger, more vibrant place than it has been in the past.
What are your views on the challenges facing the Jewish community, in particular, in this area?
Well, another problem that Broward has is that it doesn't have the significant wealth as some of the other surrounding Jewish communities. We have a lot of needy people here, people who don't have enough to eat, people who can't send their children to Jewish schools. So the community, those who can, really need to find ways to support the fellow Jews in the community who don't have the same opportunities.
David, you're involved with so many causes. Tell us a little bit about your interests other than your law practice.
Well, I try to be involved in the community. I'm very involved in the Jewish Federation of Broward County, and I serve on the board of various other organizations. I serve on the board of the Southeast Board of Directors of American Friends of Hebrew University, which supports the university in Jerusalem.
Well, speaking of Jewish federations, I understand that since they are so heavily dependent on donations and so forth, and you in your field handle people who are in a situation where they are giving. How does that fit in with federation activities?
Well, I always try to talk to people about making charity part of their estate plan. There's basically 3 people you can give to when you die. You can give to people, you can give to the government, or you can give to charity. Really, that's it. Obviously, people want to give most of their assets to their children, to their spouses. No one wants to give any money to the government, of course, but there should be somewhere in there to also take care of charity. Because Warren Buffett once said, I want to give my children enough money so they can do anything, but not so much that they can do nothing. So if you give too much money to your children, especially if you're very wealthy, they're going to become lazy, they're not going to work for it, and they're just not going to be productive members of society. So what people do is they give a large portion, people who can at least, give a large portion of their money to charity. And then also can reduce the estate tax.
Earlier today you mentioned trusts also. How do trusts serve the individual, and what exactly are they?
Well, a trust is basically a relationship, and you're giving money or assets to one person to hold in trust for another person, for the beneficiary. So let's say you wanted to set up a trust for your children. Instead of just giving the money to them directly, which they can go and spend however they want, you would set up a trust for their benefit. You would appoint an independent trustee who would be responsible for managing the money, for investing the assets, and then deciding if and when to distribute to your children. So if your children comes to the trustee and say, I want a Ferrari, the trustee can say no. But if your child says, I need money for med school, I need money for college, then the trustee can give them that money for that purposes and to make sure it isn't spent wastefully.
Well, I'd say that's a very sensible solution. even though much to the irritation of the beneficiaries, I'd imagine.
Well, sometimes the beneficiaries are irritated, but I think as they get older, they become more appreciative. Because, if I was given a significant amount of money when I was 18, it would be gone before I was 19. And now that I'm 39, I would have said, wow, I wish someone would have set up a trust for my benefit. I wish I would have had that opportunity to spread it out and wait till I'm older and more mature. Because that's really the purpose, is to make sure the beneficiary is more mature and also to protect it from the beneficiary's potential creditors. So that if someone sues the beneficiary, oftentimes money in trust can't be taken away.
Well, speaking of education and people's perception of what's important and so forth, it seems that we live in a rather complacent and jaded society in which people take everything for granted. In fact, so many people in the Jewish community have never even visited Israel, and they have no idea what's really going on there. So what are your thoughts with regard to education and the need to personally experience these things?
Well, I've been to Israel multiple times. The first time I went to Israel was actually in the 80s, and my family went on the very first Jewish Federation of Broward County. It was actually Jewish Federation of Greater Fort Lauderdale at the time, family mission to Israel. We were the first ones. I must have been 10 or 11 at the time, and it was an amazing experience. Then I went to Israel again as a teen tour. I went on a 6-week teen tour of Israel, and then I went again as an adult sometime after college. I think that Jewish education is very important because there are so many people in our community who are really Jewish by name only and have no connection to the Jewish community. They don't pay attention to Israel, they're disaffected, they don't understand, and we have to try to find a way to reach them, that the old traditional methods may not be working.
Do you find that anti-Semitism is increasing in the world today?
Outside of America, yes. I think that anti-Semitism in America is going down, and there's becoming less and less anti-Semitism in America among the general population. Sure, we have these horrible white supremacist Aryan groups, but I found very little anti-Semitism among Americans in general, which is wonderful. However, in Europe, which is becoming has very few Jews because of the Holocaust and because of immigration, then they're having an influx of Arab Muslims. They're becoming more and more anti-Semitic, and it's a real problem.
Yes, of course, we hear about the events in France and these atrocities perpetrated today, and it doesn't seem that they're going to end, unfortunately. I suppose education is the only hope for a more rational, civilized situation in Europe and elsewhere.
I think that in Europe, the general public has to be educated. First of all, there has to be Holocaust education in Europe, in France, in Spain, in Germany, in Eastern Europe, places where not just the native population, but the recent immigrants from Africa and the Arab world know nothing of the Holocaust. In fact, they've probably been told that it's a hoax, that it's something that the Jews made up to steal Israel from the Palestinians, all that nonsense. They really have to learn about, what the Holocaust was and how it happened, really, and so it doesn't happen again.
And historic facts, of course.
And historic, of course, because history. You need to know history, and I think part of the problem is that so many people don't recognize the Jewish people's long-term connection to Israel. They say that to the state of Israel, to the land of Israel. They say that that these people they're colonial. They just made it up. And they invented the Holocaust to steal the land, and that's what their schools are teaching them, and they don't know any different. Maybe if we can have some way to have full education, then they can say, okay, that the Jews have a connection to the land. And then then the peace process can go forward. Because until the Arabs accept the legitimacy of Israel and the Jews, I don't see how there can be peace.
Well, ignorance, as I mentioned, is really a big challenge and a problem. And if people would only face facts and learn the truth and build sound values, the world would be a much better place. Speaking of Israel again and facts, the fact also one to consider is that Jerusalem, the city of Solomon and David, was built more than 5,000 years ago.
I'm very interested in finding some way to have peace between Israel and its neighbors. And unfortunately, everyone has to give some concessions, and I think Israel's given tremendous amounts of concessions already. All Israel is really asking for, first and foremost, is recognition, true recognition from both the Arab heads of states and the people of the Jewish connection to Israel and the Jewish connection to Jerusalem. Because they're still seen as interlopers, they're still seen as foreigners, and until the both sides, until the Arab people say there is a Jewish connection to Israel, then I don't think the peace process can really go forward.
And of course, it is regarded by many as a preposterous situation. The Arab world has more land than the United States of America and great wealth, and there really is no great need for them to try to take control of Israel, which, as you just mentioned, historically is Jewish. And in peace, there'd be so much more everyone in the area would benefit from, just as Israel is so anxious to share technology and agricultural innovation. Everyone would gain so much more in peace.
And can you imagine if the Arab Spring really was and moved to democracy, that if the countries around Israel became open democracies where the people had full rights of speech and expression and other religions can thrive, and this democratic institutions took control? I mean, peace would be very easy because democracies don't make war against each other. Then if Egypt and Jordan and Syria and Libya became true open societies, then Israel would say, you know, maybe we don't need to put up all these defenses because we're not going to get invaded. Our society is no longer a threat. But unfortunately, I don't have much hope for those countries becoming open democracies anytime soon.
Well, all we can do is hope for peaceful solutions. And before we conclude this interview, I'd like to ask you to tell our audience a little bit more as to how you'd advise them to consider plans for the future.
Well, I think every family needs their own basic estate plan. It doesn't matter if you're rich or poor, if you're single, if you're married, if you have no children, if your children are minors or they're adults. Everyone needs a few basic documents. You need a last will and testament. You need a durable power of attorney that says if you're incapacitated, who's going to handle your affairs for you, your financial affairs. And you need a healthcare surrogate saying that if you're incapacitated, who can make healthcare decisions for you. If you don't have these documents, then what's going to happen is the government is going to come in and make those decisions for you. That the government is going to determine through intestacy how your property is distributed. If you don't have a power of attorney or a healthcare surrogate, then you're going to need a guardian to be appointed. Someone's going to have to go to court and get a guardian to be appointed, which is a very invasive and expensive and not nice procedure. It's much easier to plan in advance than to have to deal with the harsher consequences later on.
Well, this is so very interesting, and I'm sure not everyone in our audience was aware of these facts. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'll be right back.
Is that this is the first of many planes to follow.
On behalf of the entire staff, I would like to wish you a Salto on this incredible journey.
Let me commend the Nefesh B'Nefesh program for the important role that it is playing in increasing the number of Olim from North America. Together with the Jewish Agency, we support the Nefesh B'Nefesh program.
Nothing is more meaningful and more important than you coming here to become a part of this country.
This is a letter.
We're going to Israel! Yay!
We have 3 flights arriving.
3 flights landing in one day.
1 flight from JFK.
From Canada.
1 flight coming in from London.
And from the UK, all land simultaneously.
The moment you stepped foot off that plane, you inherited a land of centuries of sacrifices, of tears, of dreams, and of yearning.
This concludes our program for today with David Shulman. I'm Richard Peretz. Thank you for being with us.